So I get asked all the time, Billy, what is it like living on the coast of North Carolina and having to deal with hurricanes? Well, I think the big misconception is that when you live in a hurricane zone that you just get hammered every single hurricane season with one hurricane or tropical storm after another, and it just causes all this crazy destruction and you're constantly rebuilding. Well, folks, that's simply not the case. So, to set the record straight, I thought I would give you a little journey back over the last 50 some years of my life and tell you what it's been like for a local. I wanted to give you my perspective as somebody who grew up in this area, who has seen hurricanes and tropical storms come and go for the last 50 plus years. I know I don't look it, but I know, I get it. So, what I would like to tell you is that first I want to let you know that I love a storm. I love a storm, period. So even hurricanes, except the bad ones. We'll get to that in 1 second. But when I was a kid, my dad and I used to love to sit on the porch, bundle up, and experience a good thunderstorm, the rain and the wind and the lightning and the thundering. And I just loved it and I welcomed it. And as a little kid in the 70s, I don't really remember a lot about there being hurricanes coming through the area, although I'm sure they probably did. It wasn't until I got into my teens, when I got into the 80s, that I started understanding what tropical storms and hurricanes were all about. And there was one in particular that stood out, 1984 Hurricane Diana. That was one that came through the area that was of some significance, as were a few more. But, my parents didn't scare me and my brother about hurricanes. We were taught to respect them and respect a good storm, but not be scared of them. And to do our due diligence and to, prepare for them properly and know when to get out of Dodge when they were going to be bad enough. So there was a couple of things that we did as kids that made it kind of fun and interesting because, that's what parents do. So the first thing we would do is go track down our hurricane tracking map. And so we would go to like the local grocery store or hardware store or any business that had a stack of them. We would grab one, and then of course we would plop down in front of the TV and we watch the weather person, and they would give us the coordinates, and we would find it on the map, and we would make our little circle, and then we could kind of track it as a family and see where the hurricane's going. Is it going out to sea? Is it coming closer to us? Is it going to go past us? And that was always kind of fun, because let's face it, hurricanes are volatile. They're very finicky. They're all over the place, and in recent years, you've seen all of the spaghetti strings that the meteorologists put all over the screen to show you what the projected paths are, and they're all over the place. And back in the 80s, we didn't have that kind of technology, so we had to really rely on what the weather people told us, and we had to rely on our little maps to kind of give us an understanding and a guide of where these things were headed. And we've had hurricanes brush the edge of our coast in North Carolina. We've had them hit us head on. We've had them, there was one in particular, one, can't remember the name of it, but it hit us, went back out in the ocean, and came back in and hit us again. That was kind of interesting. We've had some hurricanes that have come at us at full force as a Category 5 and diminished down to hardly anything. We'll talk about that one specifically later. And then we've had some that just fall apart to a tropical storm and blow over us. And let's face it, a tropical storm is really just a glorified thunderstorm, is all it really is. And I will say this, in my years of experience dealing with hurricanes, I will say that most of the time, a good tropical storm or a low-grade hurricane is just an excuse to have a hurricane party. I know, I'm going to say it, but that's exactly what it is. So one other little tradition that we did as kids was to tape up our windows and our front door, because my mom's storm door was all glass, and we would put masking tape all over it. Probably a waste of time, but we did it anyway because we were being cautious and we wanted to be a part of the whole get ready for the hurricane thing. And the idea behind it is that we would tape the glass up, and if the glass got busted, it would kind of stay in place and not blow all over the house. Now, if a Category 5 had come through, it wouldn't have mattered because there probably wouldn't have been a house. So we would do that. One other thing that we did 2 different times that I remember as a kid was my parents must have thought that, and I'm pretty sure one of them was Diana. I don't remember what the other one was, but they probably thought they were going to be bad enough that we probably should go somewhere else and seek shelter just in case. And so we did just that. We went to our church that we attended, Burgaw Baptist Church, and we hunkered down in the educational building with many other families. And that was kind of, it was kind of fun, actually, because again, maybe we didn't understand the severity of the situation, but hurricanes and tropical storms, for me as a kid at least, and I'm saying all this from my perspective, were a way to break up the monotony of everyday life. We were able to maybe get out of school if school was still in at that point. My parents maybe got to stay home from work, and you just felt this hustle and bustle of everybody in town trying to run around and gather their belongings and make sure everything was out of their yard that was going to blow away. And there were people running around boarding up their businesses to make sure the windows didn't get busted out from the high winds. And it was just it was kind of fun and it was intriguing. And again, I was probably too young to understand the severity of what a really bad hurricane could do. So we did hunker down at least two different times when I was young at the Baptist church. And that was just kind of fun because we were there with other kids and families were there. And I remember my mom saying, at least we're in the house of the Lord and he will take care of us. And he always did. There was never any problems. Now, I will say, I'm going to skip into the 90s because I will say it wasn't until then, when I was in my 20s, that I really experienced what a hurricane was all about. And we had several touchdown, since the 80s, of course. But the one that sticks out for me, and for those of you hearing this that are from the area or have lived here in the past 30 some years, you'll know that I'm talking about Hurricane Fran. And that happened in September of 1996. I was 26 years old. I was living here in Wilmington with my brother in a little bungalow that we were renting. Bertha had just hit us in July and did some significant damage. And then Fran came right after her and did damage too. So at that point, I was, like I said, 26. I decided I was going to go out to Burgall to the family farm and spend the evening hunkered down with my family. And I remember getting out there and we were gathering our stuff up and securing everything. And my dad was like, you know what? It might be a really good idea if we go next door to your grandmother's house and stay in her 1963 low-slung brick ranch, because it's probably a little bit more aerodynamic than our 1989 farmhouse that we built that has a pitched roof like this. And so, yeah, I was like, probably so. So we packed up, went next door, hunkered down with her. And in true Billy and Billy's dad fashion, he and I sat on my grandmother's front screened-in porch all night long in the corner, bundled up, and we lost power. It got really dark out in the country, of course. Couldn't see anything, but what we could hear was outstanding. Just enormous amounts of howling, crazy winds with these huge bands of rain just catapulting down on the earth around us. And in the distance, we could hear cracking and falling and cracking and falling of one tree right after another. And we both looked at each other and were like, what are we going to experience tomorrow morning when this is all over with? And we found out quick enough. The next morning when the storm had passed, there were a lot of trees down. Luckily, nobody in my family, because where my parents lived at the time, it was all my family. Nobody's homes got messed up. But I remember the road was covered in trees and everybody immediately jumped out once they knew everything was safe, and they started cutting those trees out. And it took them a while, but they finally got it cleared out where I could get back on the road, because I was eager to get back to Wilmington to make sure that the house that me and my brother was renting was still there. And so I remember I made my way down Highway 53 that takes you back into Burgall, because I wanted to kind of see what, if any, damage was there. And I can honestly say I was not prepared for what I saw, because it honestly looked like a war zone. It's the worst thing I've ever seen a hurricane do up to that point, and I haven't seen anything that bad since then, to be completely honest with you. There were businesses that were damaged. There were trees down everywhere. There was water standing where water shouldn't be standing. There were houses that were completely destroyed. Houses with trees through the roof. I mean, it was crazy. I felt like I was in a war zone. I made my way back to Interstate 40, got back into Wilmington, and Wilmington had its damage too. Luckily, the house that I was staying at did not have any damage. We were without power for about a week or so, so you can only imagine what it's like in the South in the summertime: hot, humid, sticky, nasty, horrible. And it was just a horrible way to live. But we rallied like we always do, and everybody got out and started helping everybody clean up. And it took Wilmington and Burgall weeks and weeks to get all of the debris out of the way. And then it was the rebuild process, trying to get everybody's homes rebuilt back the way they were supposed to be. I know one particular family who lost their home completely. So that was pretty devastating. That was pretty rough. As the years went on, there were a few that stick out in my head. 1999, Floyd dropped a lot of water on our area. Did more flooding inland than it did anywhere else. So that was a big deal. 2004, Charlie comes to my mind too. That was I had just purchased my condo that I was living in on Wrightsville Avenue, and I remember that was not a bad hurricane, and we were kind of all having our little hurricane party out in the front parking lot, and a big gust of wind came and it snapped the top of one of the trees out in the backyard, and the top of that tree decided to land right in the roof of the condo above me, and so they had water pouring in. Luckily, I didn't have any damage. She did, but needless to say, the party was over. Then we're going to move a little forward to 2018. For those of you that remember 2018, that was Hurricane Florence. I had just moved into my home here, and I was super excited to be here. And I was like, oh, hurricane's coming, great, blow everything away. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, this one was coming in as a Category 5. She was not playing, and it really scared a lot of people because we haven't had a Hurricane 5 hit us. I don't think, and I'm not an expert at this, but I don't think we've had a Hurricane 5 hit us since Hurricane Hazel in 1954. I could be wrong. I didn't do my research on that, unfortunately. I will find out. I'm going to include some links to some statistics about hurricanes in this area down below, so you can click on that and get way more information than what I'm giving you. But that was interesting because it was coming in at a 5. A lot of people left. All the beaches were evacuated. It was a mandatory evacuation. My best friend Mark was living with me at the time, and he was from Greensboro, and so he said, "I'm going back to Greensboro. I'm not staying here." So he left me here by himself, and I decided to secure my home and go on the northern side of Wilmington to stay with my parents because they were living in Wilmington at that point, and I spent the evening with them. But luckily, thank God, Hurricane Florence coming in at a Category 5 slowed down to a 2 before it hit us. Thank God, because it could have been utterly catastrophic if it hit us at a 5. So we got so lucky and so blessed in that respect. Everybody lost power, of course. There was some minor damage and trees down and things like that. Once I knew that the storm was past, I was like, I'm going to go back across town. I'm going to go check on my place to make sure it's good. I get here, I walk in my front door. My lights are on, it's nice and cool in here. And I was like, oh God, I love my house. I have a bank of sliders on this wall behind the camera here. I had them all boarded up. So it was nice, and you couldn't see anything outside. It was nice and cozy in here. And I was like, wait a minute. How do I have power? This is crazy. Well, I found out later that my neighborhood and a few of the other surrounding neighborhoods sit so close to the hospital, which is right up the road, that we're on the hospital grid for electricity. So I hardly ever lose power, and when I do, it doesn't stay off very long. Thank God. So I tried to get my parents to come and stay with me, and they weren't having it. So I said, well, I'm staying in luxury. I'm not going to stay with you over with no heat or no air conditioning. And so we were without power for, again, about a week, everybody here in the area. So you remember me telling you that I love storms, and I do still to this day. I love storms so much, and I was never really scared of a storm or a tropical storm or a hurricane. But I will say this, the evening after Florence went through, the residual winds were kicking up tornadoes everywhere. So that evening, that day that I came home and decided to stay, that evening, my phone was going off constantly with one tornado alert after another. And I will honestly say, I got a little scared. I was like, my roof is going to blow off. And at one point, I found myself in my little tiny linen closet in the hallway, which is right in the center of my house. And I thought, this is going to be the safest place to be if something really happens. It didn't, thank God. But I will say I was scared, and it wasn't even really hurricane related. It was hurricane adjacent because of the tornadoes. And let's face it, unlike our brothers and sisters that live out west, we get notified when there's a tropical storm or a hurricane heading our way. We have days and days to prepare. And that's important. And you should know that if you're thinking about moving to the North Carolina coast or really anywhere on the coast that has potential hurricanes, you need to know what to do to prepare yourself. And this is not a hurricane tutorial. I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. It's kind of makes common sense. Batteries, make sure your phones are charged up, make sure you got enough food, make sure you got enough water. Fill your bathtub up. That's what my mom used to do. Fill your bathtub up. So if you need to flush your toilet, you can just get water out of your tub. Makes really good sense. Don't go nuts and go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of bread and milk. That is so stupid. To this day, I still can't figure out why people do that. Do people think there's going to be some kind of like French toast emergency? I don't get it. So don't do that. But make sure you're stocked up on food. It might be a good idea to get yourself a generator so that you can power some things in your house, like your refrigerator or whatever. It might be a good idea to go as far as maybe having a generator installed into your home if you're allowed to do that where you live. That's a really good idea, because then you can keep the whole house going and you're good and you're not really being interrupted. So there's lots of things to think about, making sure that anything that might blow away, pulling your boats out of the water if you have a boat and you live here, paying attention to the authorities when they tell you if you're living at any of the beaches and they tell you to leave. If they think it's going to be bad enough, do that. Your life is worth more than anything else in this world. But there's a lot of stubborn people out there that won't do it. And so it's been a very interesting ride over the past 50 plus years of seeing the tornadoes, seeing the hurricanes and the tropical storms come through here. And I will say, again, more often than not, it's been more of a hurricane party situation than it has been something that's been bad and catastrophic. Again, if you look at the statistics and the numbers from 1996's Fran to 2018's Florence that did, significant damage and a lot of flooding, that's a big span right there. That really, the odds are in our favor for sure. Now, I'm not saying that can change on a dime and we could get hit every single season and hit all the time. But, hurricane season runs from June 1st to the end of November. That's half of the year that we could potentially have hurricanes. And it seems like most of our hurricanes come like in the August, September area. It seems like it. Again, I'm no expert. If there's experts out there, you can correct me. But I will say something about Hurricane Florence, and this is about flood insurance. And I've talked about this before in some of my other videos. When Hurricane Florence came through, it dumped an exorbitant amount of water on our area, especially here in Wilmington. And areas in Wilmington that were not considered in flood zones, they flooded, which is not good. So there was a lot of people that had a lot of damage that was done because of water that they really couldn't do anything about, not flood insurance wise. So I heard something about a year and a half ago on a program that I was watching about flood insurance, and it said if it can rain at your house, it can flood at your house. And that's a really good rule of thumb to stick by. So think about it. If you are considering moving to the Wilmington area, or maybe you live here and you don't have flood insurance, might be a good idea to carry it just in case for situations just like what happened to us with Florence. Not a bad idea. So reach out to your insurance person, find out how much it costs. I don't think it's that much, just to have that little extra layer of protection. Now, I'm not saying any of this to scare you. I'm not saying any of this to keep you from moving to the Wilmington area. We have a lovely area that we live in, and it is beautiful from the beaches to the historic downtown and everything in between. It is a wonderful place to live. But just know that if you're thinking about moving here or anywhere in the greater Cape Fear area, you're going to have to deal with tropical storms and you're going to have to deal with hurricanes occasionally when they pop through here. It's just knowing how to take care of yourself, knowing how to take care of your property, and making the right decisions. That's what it's all about. So that's what I have for you today. I hope you found it informational and entertaining. If you have any questions at all about hurricanes or my experiences with them other than what I told you, or any of my other experiences being a native of the area, I am here to help you in any way I can. And if you are thinking about relocating to the Wilmington area, I have put together a really good relocation guide. I think it's good. And if you're interested in all that information, then you can click the link down below and you give me your name and some other information, and I will zip it right to you. And hopefully it will answer a lot of your questions. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Billy Corbett with Port City Living. And just remember, go out in this world and treat everybody exactly how you want to be treated. Bye, everybody.